So just a word of introduction from me. I'm Sarah Hayward, as Richard has said. I'm Managing Director of an organisation called Advanced Oxford. We are a business leadership group for science and technology within the whole of Oxfordshire. I am also a member of the Supercluster Board, and I also sit on the Innovation and Economy Group of the Pan-Regional Partnership. So you've heard from Rachel, she's introduced herself, so if you don't mind, I won't let you say it again. Lynette, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hello, I'm Professor Lynette Riles. I'm a Pro-Vice-Chancellor at Cranfield University and I run MKU here in Milton Keynes.
Thank you. Zoe.
Hi, I know many of you in the room. I'm a director at Atkins Realis, a global professional engineering services company, globally about 40,000 people, but with locally based in this region and working across a huge range of supply chain in this region. And I'll pick up that a little bit more as to why this region is so important to us and our success.
Jason.
Jason Longhurst. I'm UK Head of Sustainable Investments and Partnerships at Prologis. I'm also the new Chair of the South Midlands Region Business Board and also Chair of the UK Business Council for Sustainable Development. So a lot of that centres on this region.
And Matt.
Hi, Matt Kingan. I'm a Director at iSenior Projects in our Planning and Economics team. We provide advice to public bodies around the UK, and I've been fortunate enough to be leading the Science, Innovation, Technology Business Premises study on behalf of the Pan-Regional Partnership, looking at a wide range of issues, particularly around sort of the innovation centres across a number of sectors that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more in detail.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to continue with this theme of headwinds and tailwinds and explore them in a little bit more depth. So I'm going to pick up on initially, Lynette, with you, if I may, on a theme that was brought out both by Sean and also from Rachel in terms of the absolute importance of talent and skills. Your work at Cranfield and also with MKU is at the heart of that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think the strengths of this region are?
And yes, I think we've heard loads about the fantastic original science, the sort of very, very low TRL science that is being done here. But I would also say we've heard about life sciences, and I think Sean's made that case very, very eloquently. But we also, in this region, let's not forget that we have some amazing strengths in things like fintech, in AI, in robotics and automation. We are part of the Golden Logistics Triangle in the UK. So there are actually probably half a dozen or so really key industries and sectors that are strongly represented here and where we have a really strong talent base as well. So I thought it was really interesting, the point that Rachel was making about focusing in and not trying to be everything to everybody and really sort of driving on some of those key things and trying to build that talent cluster around that. So what we're doing at Cranfield and MKU is we're working in particular on the notion of applied learning. So not just the theoretical part, it's the application of that theoretical knowledge and that into skills and into the behaviours that businesses need. And I kind of think that might be the missing middle about the point I think somebody made earlier on. We're fantastically good at new ideas and we are less good at scaling them up. So actually trying to build talent here that isn't just deep theoretical, but also has a broader vision around commercial skills, professional skills, people skills, I think is really important. So taking that applied learning and broader notion. And one of my colleagues talks about T-shaped people. So they have a deep technical skill, but they have that broader, the band across the top of the T, which is that broader notion of the wider professional and interpersonal skills.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to this issue of, in a sense, we have an embarrassment of riches within this region. So that need to really ruthlessly focus and think about where the opportunities lie is something that we do. So Rachel, I'll come back to you if I may on that question. Jason, if I can turn to you, you represent a company that's an international company. So we've been hearing a little bit about, from Sean, the perspectives from a multinational company about what makes a country and in turn a region attractive. Could you reflect from your experience in terms of did the issues that Sean set out for life sciences resonate with you from a different sector? Is there anything that you would add in?
Yeah, it does resonate. Prologis is the largest global REIT, so we operate across the world, and that includes everything from life sciences right through to what I'd say is foundation sectors of industrial logistics. And I'd share the view that the region's got to realise the diversity it has in sectors, fintech, right through AI, as well as what I'd call core industrial sectors. So it's beyond riches. From our perspective globally, for Prologis, one, we're hyper competitive by country. So we're looking at the highest growth, the most confident areas we can invest in, and strength of partnership. And I think it's interesting coming here today when you say strength of partnership, which has got to be a balance between policy and actual local partners. So just in the last 12 months, this area is attractive for us just over $1 billion of investment. And the projection for this region is around another 6 billion in the next 5 years. But that is heavily predicated on policy, the confidence of local markets, and frankly, the ease of being able to connect into local supply chain sectors. And that's everything from life sciences. And I will say this, that's not just Cambridge, it's not just Oxford, it is that whole mechanism. And I think that's the challenge for us in the UK. One is a policy environment. We're doing a lot of work with government, but actually it's getting a concise offer where we can see that local collaboration. So that really is key. And when you sit on a US board and actually ask for scale of investment we talk about, the first question comes back is, do we have the confidence in that region? And when you talk about regions, the US team does not see this as a big player, because if you work out the people within it, it's quite a limited space in our sort of investment strategy. So the pan-regional aspect shouldn't be lost on the scale you need to actually get investment. So it's good to hear scale mentioned, not just around people or the sectors we've got.
So just if I can quickly follow up on that, we heard from Sean about the importance of long-term thinking and a stable business environment. So you've talked about policy. Is it about that stability and long-term thinking for you, or are there specific policy issues that you think need to be really developed or focused to see that investment that you're talking about?
I think there's strategic policies, then individual. So from our perspective, one is the confidence in the UK. And the last 2 years has been interesting to say we had that confidence. It's a wait and see for where we are at the moment after responding to the MPPF, the industrial strategy, but from a strategic investor perspective. I would probably go with Nick's comment about if we're going to start surfing, we want to know that you can do that in a stable way, who you're surfing with, and do you actually know where you're going? So that pan-regional element is key. One thing to stay on the surfboard, the other one is we want that confidence that we are creating that environment that we can all succeed. And really to close on, I think it's, again, life science is absolute given. It's for us to fail on. And I think attracting that investment, I'll take one example in Cambridge. We've just announced £500 million investment into phase 2 at the biomedical campus. The biggest barriers we face there will be access to water, power. It's not going to be workforce. The confidence globally has to be there that none of those aspects will trip you up. So I think the region, there's a lot to lose if you don't have the pan-regional offer, because that just about ticks the minimal scale for an investment. So I think these are some of the aspects before you get into the finer grain.
So Zoe, if I can turn to you, you've got sustainability very much at the heart of your agenda. I was struck that we didn't hear very much about sustainability from Sean or Rachel, notwithstanding the fact that obviously we haven't seen the full detail of the work. But can I ask you therefore, how do we ensure that we place sustainability into the agenda to grow this region?
Yeah, so I would say there is lots of amazing work already going on in this region around sustainability and trailblazing and pioneering new demonstrators that have a global impact. And what I would stress is actually really how we really focus on our ability to thrive as a region. And the flip side of that is our resilience. So we have a fantastic evidence around steps that we're taking whereby we're looking at things in a multifunctional, multi-purpose way. So when we're looking at East-West Rail and how that route has been generated across the region, we've been thinking about how that route took its path to mitigate impact on nature, to think about how its relationship with natural resources and how it delivered a very high level of biodiversity net gain. Now that's pioneering thinking, and that's partnership working to generate those outcomes. If I give another example of a really fantastic demonstrator, is we've got, obviously a big agricultural industry in this region. And we have the Northeast Farming Cluster, which is 60 farmers working together in partnership to understand the nature markets, biodiversity net gain, carbon sequestration with, I believe it's Gresham Bank. And they're utilising, with our support, a digital twin to help them make better and informed decisions. I introduced Network Rail into that amazing cluster of farmers who, Network Rail, were looking at how do we deploy habitat and trees to help inform the climate resilience of our railways, because actually nature-based solutions can be far cheaper, far longer term to inform climate resilience, but also improve health and safety, remove operatives from working on the rail. I had the pleasure of them presenting to Brussels, to the International Union of Railways, that thinking, that pioneering thought, and we're now looking at supporting global railway networks. So the point I want to make, there's actually lots of really good sustainable development and thinking that's gone on in this region. Take Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes, designed as it has been a huge success. It is now incredibly successful. You've got more people commuting into Milton Keynes to work than you have going out. It's now in a place that it needs to grow. It has got some challenges around it. There's great lessons there. So what I feel really strongly about the case for this pan-regional partnership is that we really, really need to articulate really strongly what this region does in terms of the impact on place within this region and the nation, but actually the global stage. Yesterday, I had the privilege of being with the space sector. So I had space tech, I had digital, I had scientists, I had academia from the whole of this region, hosted by Trillium Technologies at Oxford, looking at future-proofing the UK. So looking at global challenges that are relevant in many places all over the world in a UK context. We had people there that are looking at growing organs in space, because do you know what? It's easier to grow an organ and take the internal structure out in a gravity-free zone than it is to do it on Earth, right? That's all here in this region. It's absolutely amazing. But what we highlighted yesterday as a session, a workshop, is we are not shouting loudly enough about the brilliant work we're doing and the impact we're having globally on regions, on businesses, on communities across the globe, which is really significant. I think policy, we sadly lost things like the national strategy for digital twins, which is actually really key. I'm hoping with the European Space Agency support that we might be able to roll out our first demonstrator in this region. We've already done work with 4 of the universities around that. But we need to have government underpinning and seed funding some of this work. So we need to see that shift. But for me, the pan-regional partnership really demonstrates alignment with the green industrial strategy. We need to be feeding back on that in the case. We really need to be strongly saying this is our opportunity and this is what we need to do in order to thrive through the partnerships, through the businesses, through academia, through the sciences, through all the work we're doing in this region. So that's one from me.
Great, thank you so much. A lot there within your answer. Matt, we heard from Sean about the importance of place, and we know that place isn't just about buildings. It's very much about what happens in those buildings and how the people inside are supported. You've been doing work with the Pan-Regional Partnership looking on this question of whether we have the right places and sufficient level. Could you share a little bit about the work that you've been doing and what you think the strengths are that we have at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. It's been fascinating. It's been quite a sort of nitty-gritty piece of work. So we've been around looking at innovation centres across the partnership area. So that's everywhere from kind of Culham at the Energy Centre in Oxfordshire and through to Silverstone Engineering Park and the Sports Engineering Hub, being driven around very quickly in a Land Rover around UTAC, Millbrook Proving Grounds, up to Chelveston Energy Park, across speaking to NIAB in Cambridgeshire and the Science Park and Babraham Research. So, you know, what you see is all of these innovation centres, and I guess this is where the things really happen. You know, you start off in the university, that's where people learn, they develop their minds. But then for us to deliver economic growth, you know, we've got to capitalise on that. So these innovation centres are the places, I guess, where often academics are starting to translate into commercial enterprise. Now, the things about innovation centres, you know, a lot of the time, the public sector are not necessarily going to want to invest there. So, you know, the public purse does need to find ways to ensure that we have the right kind of spaces. And in science and technology, these spaces, sometimes it's just an office or a kind of a basic dry lab, but a lot of the time it needs more technology and infrastructure. So, for example, at the Silverstone Sports Engineering Hub, and if you ever get the chance to go there, absolutely amazing. A wind tunnel the size of this room, where there's kind of a fixed bike sat right in the middle. You can get a 60-mile-an-hour wind. Someone's going to sit on that bike. They're going to find out the aerodynamics of process. Or downstairs, they've got a pedal efficiency rig with kind of a 6-meter wheel that's underground that kind of spins round. Loads of technology. Again, as I said, in Central Beds, we've got UTAC Millbrook, where there's kind of a history of vehicle testing. And that's everything from kind of emissions testing to crash testing. So there's an incredible physical infrastructure that's kind of out there, and that enables these kind of ideas to translate into commercial entities. And they're the things that then become businesses that grow and create jobs and employment. And that's kind of the expanse. So down at that nitty-gritty end, getting the premises right, getting the support infrastructure at those premises, and also the pathway and the life cycle of business as it goes from a startup to a scale up. So it's not just 500 square foot in the corner of some innovation building, but it's like, where do you go next? Again, the Prologists of this world love to provide kind of bigger buildings. Not that they don't do smaller ones, but there are a lot of kind of market failures and sometimes sort of market signals and information gaps that we need to keep a really kind of close eye on to support innovation and looking ahead 5 and 10 years, ensure that we've got like the continued platforms for growth.
So Rachel, if I can turn to you, because one of the things that you talked about as a constraint was infrastructure, and we've been hearing from Matt about some of the specialist infrastructure. But I was also really struck that you touched on a constraint being support for startups and scale up, which moves us sort of into more what I would deem soft infrastructure, so business support type of activities. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think works well at the moment, and then perhaps you could turn and talk about what you think we need to do to shift it to the next level.
Of course. So I guess I'm going to go back to my original presentation, which is the challenge for this region is not on a per capita basis what it provides, but it's its fundamental scale. So why does infrastructure really matter? Why do you need a railway? Why do you need development between these places? Because it is only then that you are really a region performing at its current per capita level rather than a set of isolated places. That's really at heart what we are saying. And what makes those places grow? Infrastructure, the ability to build and develop in the region. People are not coming here because it's cheap. And they're not coming here because it's easy, right? They're coming here despite those things because the people are so good. How do you make it easier for them? And capital, like funding, and funding of a kind that others in this room will have spent much more time than me, but as you were saying, gets you from the startup, the small, through scale to the large. And some of that's people. It's the right kind of people to do that at those levels. It's the kind of technical skills and the broader skills that we've done it. Some of it is capital, and some of it's capital in the right way, under the right conditions, with the right support. So my view, and I'm interested in the rest of the panel, is that it's very, very, very easy to identify across this region lots of ways this is being done very, very well. There's just not enough of it.
So, Lynette, if I can come back to you, just reflecting a little bit on that. You were talking about real strengths that we have, where we have the opportunity to drive new businesses and to see those scale up. We've got a modern industrial strategy that is being consulted on at the moment. The consultation closed on Monday, and we will be able to align many of our strengths against the themes. I mean, I would argue personally that they're not sectors because they're themes within that industrial strategy. As an academic institution, do you take from that industrial strategy in terms of either how you present the strengths and the opportunities, but also in terms of how you support skills and talent to align with those areas that governments seem to be focusing on?
I think it's a great question. And in fact, Cranfield University is unique, I think, in the UK in the way that we present ourselves to business. So we actually organise ourselves thematically rather than saying, there's a chemistry department, there's a physics department. Actually, we're organised along theme lines, and that does reflect those broader industrial sectors. And actually, we're looking again at that now, thinking about realigning, thinking about the influence of the industrial strategy. So I think that's one key point. In terms of what the blockers might be, if I could just for a moment, several people already this morning have spoken about planning and issues around planning. We know that's something the government's interested in. I think there are a couple of other things that I think are blockers to growth in the sort of regulatory analogy of the infrastructure problems that Rachel was just talking about. And one of them is, at the moment, we've got a lot of confusion about what's happening with the apprenticeship levy and what's happening with Skills England. I know, the companies that I'm talking to are actually delaying their upskilling decisions because of that lack of clarity. It's absolutely vital that we get that sorted out. So that is a source of funding that develops a source of talent for businesses. I think the second one in that regulatory space is that Cranfield University is obviously internationally, globally known in aerospace. We are also the western end of the beyond line of sight drone corridor, and we've won enormous funding to develop hydrogen fuels, so we're doing groundbreaking work in that area, and we work very much with teams in Milton Keynes around autonomous vehicles and robots. That's a whole area. Just flying drones into city centres is a whole area where there's a lot of regulatory confusion, restrictions. Similarly with autonomous vehicles. These are very, very grey areas. So I think if I had a letter to Santa, my letter to Santa would say, let's get the Skills England thing sorted out quickly so that we can start developing that talent. But on this sort of next year view, let's get some of these other things around regulation of new industries in emerging sectors that would, I think, really help particularly small businesses to grow.
I think that's a really interesting issue. Are there, you talked about your wish list to Santa. On that regulatory question, are there a couple of things that you would immediately point to and say those are issues that either could be an enabler or currently are acting as a barrier?
Yes. So definitely what is the government's position on skills and funding of skills that is an immediate and real issue. And actually, I think that the direction of debate on this around enabling us to use the apprenticeship levy much more flexibly and potentially for much shorter kind of interventions is a really, really interesting dynamic. And actually that, if I had to hone in on one single thing, getting clarity on that, because actually a lot of the work that we do at MKU is in relation to data and digital skills. Now that's an area of really, really chronic skills shortage across the UK. What we hear from employers is they need something fast. So actually a boot camp type of solution, not an apprenticeship that has to be a minimum of 12 months. That's the government requirement. So that could be a simple thing that we could flick a switch and we could really start to drive a lot more useful and dynamic talent into the sector.
So much greater flexibility. And Zoe, from your perspective, to this question of regulation that can act either as a barrier or as an enabler, what would be on your letter to Santa?
I think there is a shift that's needed around regulation in relation to transport and the direction of travel that we need to take around adopting, I would agree, drones and autonomous vehicles, and we're testing and we've got live demonstrators that can inform the thinking. And I think it's a challenging space because you're moving into such different territory, but that needs to move at pace and scale. I think for me, the letter to Santa is more around the need for long-term strategic thinking for transport, for water, for power, for food security. We've got probably most of the answers in this room from Anglia Ruskin and the various universities around the types of things we need to be looking at alongside with partners like ourselves. And we are so hindered by the fact that politics undermines that long-term view and it means that we stumble around making those investments, that decisions. So we need to get to a place that we really are embedding long-term strategies. And also other elements are really thinking about setting up new sovereign capability. So one of the things that came out of yesterday was a sovereign data pool, so that universities, for instance, have free access to data. We're now imaging the whole planet. So there are things that could be done that would enable us to even accelerate our ability to innovate and skills. And then my other piece is that the current crisis we see universities in around funding is really significant. I am particularly concerned as a business, the impact that has on us in having the skills that we need today and tomorrow to tackle the uncertainty and the complexity we have at this time. I'm worried about holding on and retaining to those with real wisdom that are in the latter stages of their career who are invaluable to us at the moment with the crisis. That is a major concern that I have as a business right now.
Okay, great, thank you. I think just picking up on your point about data and availability of data, that again is an area that's been identified within the industrial strategy. And in the expectation that there will be regional plans developed to take forward industrial strategy, perhaps that's something from a regional perspective, Oxford to Cambridge, that we can really think about how we reflect that into our plans. Rachel, if I can just come back to you for a moment. I'm struck at the moment, we're sort of hearing from everybody about the real need for pace, for ambition, to be bold. I'm also very conscious at the moment that we've got quite a lot of policy initiatives going on, which have the risk of pulling people in different directions. On the other hand, if we manage to do it well, they could actually be reinforcing. So we've got the devolution bill coming, we've got the consultation that's been undertaken on the MPPF, we've got modern industrial strategy. With your experience of working within Whitehall and within the policy making, what are the things that we can do collectively as a region to try and encourage alignment across all of those pieces?
So my own view is that the only question is how much does this really matter to the government? How much does Downing Street and the Treasury really think this region is the source of a paradigmatic shift in their intent, in their growth and productivity desires versus one of many worthy things that could happen? And if they decide it really matters, bluntly, the overlapping of the plans and the consultations, and it's irritating that the industrial strategy is all sectoral when actually we really know that planning matters to everyone, all of that goes away. So my view, and I'm sorry to Mike and others, I'm now just giving my view, this is not the report, is that the question for this group is how do you make sure that this is a tier 1 priority? And then everything else falls into place. And if not, the reason it's confusion and the reason it feels overlapping, it's pulling lots of different directions, is no one cares enough.
So just coming back, if I may, to the piece of work that you've done, given that you've thrown down that challenge, do you think that it creates, the evidence base that you've generated, do you think it creates that burning
100%.
platform?
100%.
Good. Well, that's very good to hear. So we look forward to seeing it. I'm conscious that there may be some questions from the floor. So can I invite any questions? Alistair.
Thanks, Plessy. Yes, I'm Alistair Lomax, Director of the Arc Universities Group. Matt, I've also been to see the velodrome, and Rob Lewis is the entrepreneur who took such huge personal risk in growing his company at Silverstone and creating a bloom of effect that went, and the two different regions, you had Semlep in one part of the track and Buckinghamshire Lep on the other part of the track. So they were overlapping LEPs, or literally. But we had the Local Growth Fund, and the Local Growth Fund supported the risk-taking of the individual. And I'd like to hear from people what support, we've got very established companies, Prologis and AstraZeneca, but how are we going to support more risk-taking for entrepreneurs and people thinking of spinning out their activities when we're in a region which has, in Oxford, has more spin-outs than any other university in the world. But actually, we've got a whole region here, and how can we create that bloom effect and support people to take similar risks? Thank you.
So if I may take the privilege of being on the chair of the panel, I'm going to just very quickly reflect a little bit of data from some work that we have done, which is we've very recently published a green paper on availability of private capital for high growth potential science and technology companies. And of the companies that have been raising investment, less than 20% of those are university spin-outs. So I would plead that we don't forget that companies come from very many sources. And whilst our universities are an incredible source of capability and new companies, we need to make sure that we've got a level playing field for all companies because they are all worthy of support and often are lacking it. So Lynette, you are right at the fore of this debate about how we support companies, whether they be spin-outs or whether they be others. What are your thoughts in response?
Yes, it's a really interesting question from Al. So we've got in NKU, we've actually got an innovation hub where we've got about 1,000 members who are entrepreneurs or innovators. And one of the approaches that we've used there is to actually integrate that with everything else that's happening academically, so that our students and apprentices get to meet and bump into the innovators and entrepreneurs. I noticed that in a lot of universities, they're actually two separate activities, so maybe bringing those together might be something for us to think about, a different kind of model of that interaction, and actually encouraging students, even if they are already in work, to learn entrepreneurial skills, because actually being an intrapreneur inside an organisation is really valuable. I think the second quick point that I would make to the question there is I've also, in my innovation hub, come across people who've got capital and are looking for opportunities to invest in. So that there is something here about we need a mechanism that puts together those opportunities with the funding opportunities. And actually that's perhaps something that we haven't really. There are some very good exceptions in this room who are trying to do that, bring together. But that notion of being that marriage of the people who want to invest and the organisations who want to invest and the organisations waiting to be invested in that's a tricky area.
Yeah. So has anybody else got any thoughts on this? Zoe?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a huge shift in the way that institutional investors, SDG funding, ESG funding, we're seeing a positive shift happening in that place. We know there are big global funds, but the pathways don't often exist. And what do those funds want? They want scale. They want the agglomeration that Rachel was speaking to earlier. Now, what we've seen in a very fragmented way in different parts of the UK, we get different things set up like an Habitat Bank, we'll see an Evergreen Fund. I suppose my reflection and therefore an opportunity is how, if we look at the Green Industrial Strategy, for instance, how do we create the opportunity to generate large funding pots that global entities or even the SDG funds that come from the US could go into to help provide that confidence from a funding point of view? You know, how do we, potentially set up new structures to enable that? I'm separating that from the local government pension fund, which is obviously a separate journey that's in place now, and that would link probably more to county combined authorities as being the conductors of those potential new funds that would support place-based impact. But I think that's what we need to do, is create those funding structures, that framework that support our key priorities and support growth.
In the future of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus site. What I want to ask you about as the planning authority is about how much you value placemaking, because when I visit the companies on the existing site, which I do a lot, they are telling me that the deficit in placemaking, because the CB site has kind of evolved and there hasn't really been a plan to date, that the sort of lack of placemaking, the lack of nurseries for people's staff, the lack of somewhere to buy a sandwich other than going onto the concourse of the hospital and so on, actually is impacting negatively on their ability to recruit and retain staff. So, you know, we feel that, we heard from the keynote speaker that he wants simplification of planning, but planning is placemaking. And, you know, from our point of view, that placemaking is all to do with health and well-being, the lifestyle, and we know that in Cambridge, we find it very difficult to recruit the sort of whizzy young people of my children's age from Bristol and Reading. So I'm just interested to know about how much value you put on that placemaking rather than just, you know, building places where stuff happens.
It's not a loaded question at all. Well, one, we've got an invite extended to you to come and see us anyway. So the simple bit, whether it's Cambridge or the whole Pan region, I'll probably pick up 3 points because I'm a little frustrated on we're missing the opportunity. So I'll answer the Prologis question at Cambridge. Yes, we're all about placemaking. It has to be about the quality of the place. That affects the fact we're an ESG-based company. We build beyond net zero, whether it's, you know, a shed, life science supply chain, whether it's the defence industry, etc. That's core to us because that affects our 2 primary investment funds, which is the other aspect. I think, you know, some of the aspects we're talking about are regional. If this is about a pan-regional offer, that's why you need a pan-regional partnership. So we touched on it on scale. Yes, life science is the sexy thing. So we had a wonderful meeting, I think 81 days into the new government with Rachel Reeves. But the key question we put to Rachel when she asked us, so where do you invest? It was quite shocking to see her face when we said, well, you know, obviously US, because it's easy. Japan, because they've got really clear policies and we know what we're investing in. Mexico, because they're willing to play in a set of right investment environment, and that includes policy. And then we start going down the list. Sustainability is core to all the follow-on questions we get. Placemaking is essential, because again, it's pointless. We don't just build. You know, we're fund-led, we're judged on long-term commitment, and it is about that quality you present, and that affects your funders, it affects the partners that come into those facilities, and it shapes your whole portfolio. So that's absolutely core to us, and that's what we judge, not just counties on, regions on, countries on. So for the Cambridge example, yes, we're taking a gamble, we've made that very clear. There has to be a strategic alignment to address water, waste, the whole management. We've met with the City Council, we're starting to meet with others. As a pan-region, you know, I used to run the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. Prior to that, it was called, was it the corridor, the banana, the chili? There needs to be a mature conversation because you're at a crossroads now. And as I say, our investment to date has really been on the back of a change of government and environment that we think might come with policy change. The scale of that, and we're not alone, you're talking, you know, we had a round table with Johnny Reynolds and we brought global investors into the room. That was $1.5 trillion worth of people, and it was only 10 people, which was slightly scary, sitting in a room to talk about what they need for confidence, and that was at UK level. So I think, you know, for everybody in the room, yes, look, education, workforce, skills, connectivity, a functional region. And I think, you know, being very pleased to step into the South Midlands region as a new regional opportunity, that still has to sit under a pan-regional offer, or we do not have the scale. And I think this area has been haunted for too long of piecemeal thinking. We talk about nice strategy. This stuff is great. We've got intelligence coming out of our ears. Welcome the latest stuff that comes back. But frankly, we set this out in 2014. I think, as I said at the start, it was set out 20 years ago. If we do not actually make this supercharged, and it's not a buzzword, our challenge is, so what are the catalytical things that get this region as one? I think Cambridgeshire, the combined authority, that approach has to be core to how you look at what is the South Midlands. You need to look at how Oxfordshire, the Buckinghamshires of this world, what role are they playing? We've always talked and nodded towards Hertfordshire, how does that actually sit? The Northamptonshire, Bedfordshires have come together in a way that I think is quite interesting. So there's a political dimension, but if you genuinely want to be building on, you know, the AAA status that we should have globally, and I'll throw Cranfield into that, locally you sort of go, oh, where's Cranfield? Globally, that's not an issue. So we're not playing off those strengths. I think the diversity of industry, the diversity of innovation, we are not giving it a clear platform to build off. So it's great when we go down this sort of individual parts, and I take the challenge for Cambridge. Cambridge, you know, I'm born and bred Cambridge, strangely. It has failed to get ahead. Its infrastructure's lagged, and they are national debates, not silo debates. So it's how we collectively can stimulate that. So from a Prologis perspective, it's quite easy. You know, we are looking for the most sustainable, long-term investments. We stick around. I'm literally going down on Monday to a project called The Bridge in Dartford. That's 20 years of investment, weirdly started under the last Labour government. Mixed use, integrated, and we walk away with, strangely, public and private sector all making a profit and leaving behind a sustainable community. So that's the type of investment we should be encouraging. When you come to this region, it is incredibly frustrating to see the breadth, the diversity and opportunity that we aren't harnessing. We allow ourselves to be picked off by the government. And just to close my sort of rant, the last time I was heavily involved in this under the public sector, we got offered 1.2 billion of direct investment from a government, and we failed to sign because we couldn't align as a region. And that I found incredibly frustrating. It's probably why I went north, because we just couldn't strategically operate as one. So that's the scale. If you play to government in the right way, that was about a single offer. It was aligned partners, it was strength of voice, and it was presenting this as a whole region. If you go 10 minutes up the road, and I know people have mentioned, you know, the north, the rebalancing, this isn't about levelling up. This area should be competing on GDP impact for the UK. And then you would get the same attention London does, that sits there going, we generate the most. It's not an argument, it's not a battle. We all should be exceeding that generation of growth. So there's a lot of challenges there, but I think it's sad to come to an event when you've got things like the future of a pan-regional aspect being sort of rolled over, rather than us going, right, we can't lose this. You've got a room full of absolute key players, and we're part of that. So we invest in Cambridge because we have faith, and that is about how we work, and we see that there are partners there. The same with the pan-regional partnership. You need the collaboration, or you will not invest. And for our global board, we were very fortunate to meet Rachel, Veron, Johnny Reynolds. You know, it was quite a busy day, but the simple message we were making is, as one company, you know, there are significant other funds that would come, but not if you cannot see the investment. And it isn't asking the government for money from our point of view. That was policy change, long-term commitment to partners in this room, that we can see that that infrastructure can be grown together with us on very key sectors that we invest in.
Right, well, thank you for your passionate plea there. I'm conscious that we are out of time. There is so much more that we could have discussed, and many topics that we haven't actually covered, or we've only just touched on in very superficial ways. But I hope that in drawing together, we've heard about some of the headwinds, some of the challenges that potentially hold us back. But I think we've also really importantly heard about the opportunities, the strengths that we have, and the size of the prize. And I personally, I'm very encouraged that if, you know, as Jason has said, we all continue to work together and make the case for this region, hopefully we can absolutely cement government support and the long-term, bold and ambitious thinking that we need. So please join me in thanking our panel.